Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Premier Power Rankings. I am Cole Exner McHenry, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the adjustments I've made. But before we get into that, I'm going to first ask you all to make sure that you like and subscribe to the video, to the channel. It actually means a lot that you all have been supporting me continuously throughout these videos that I've been making, and I ask that you, if you have not yet subscribed, make sure that you do that to keep up to date on all of the latest videos that I'm creating. But with that being said, I'll go ahead and throw it over to the reasons why I've made these adjustments here. Today I'm going to be talking about the three factors that have impacted my new adjustments to the power rankings. The first one I'll talk about is roster changes. I want to give a huge shout out to Dust2, who has been keeping me updated on all of the roster adjustments, all the roster changes that I've been going through, or at least all the ones that have been officially announced. They are a super useful website for keeping up with all of the, North American CS news, so go check them out. Dust2.us. They are what I use to keep up to date on all of the rosters, and I really do appreciate all the work that they're doing over there. But with that being said, I'll also talk about ESEA's Cash Cup, their Winter Cash Cup worth $15,000. That was won by Bad News Bears, who I will talk about later on in the video, but they have been really impressing me. Next up, I'll talk a little bit about Mythic Cup and the reasons I've played those into my my current rankings, and then that is all that I have for basically the adjustments that have been made into the current rankings. I talked a little bit about the DreamHack Open qualifier, but not too much. But with that being said, I'll give you a little rundown, a little show notes. I've been changing the background colors to match the team logos of the teams to try and help you all navigate the video. I'll also make sure to throw in some timestamps as well. Then finally, the players that I've highlighted in bold are going to be players that have been recently added to the roster. Along with this, the scores on the current scores are all going to remain at 0-0-0 until games have been played in the official Premier season. So I'll only be updating scores when teams have played in Premier. These don't reflect the scores of like Cash Cups, DreamHack Qualifier, or Mythic Cups. It'll only count towards Premier seasons. And so while I take into account the matches that have been played between these teams, from the qualifiers, from the Cash Cups, from the Mythic Cup, I do not consider that to be like part of the score of the season for these two teams, or for these 20 teams. But with that being said, I will go ahead and throw it over to the spreadsheet. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. So the first team I'm going to be talking about today is High Coast. They have the roster of DJ, Ponalone, Rampage, Binley, and Boo with the coach of Monster. They're the winners of the Mythic Cup. They had a really good grand final showing, a really good run in the tournament in general, and because of that, I moved them up a spot. I'm still keeping Triumph at 2 because of the fact that they did look really promising. They look like they have a very strong core. Just hasn't quite had enough time to really gel yet together, and I think with an IGL like Shake, it's not going to take too much time to get these players activated. They have a lot of skill in this lineup, so I've got high expectations for this roster, no doubt. So leaving them at number 2, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. But that's pretty much the main notes on High Coast. I think the addition of Boo is a really good change for High Coast. They kind of looked a little bit lacking without him after that win against Furia, where they were able to utilize him really well. And obviously he was able to perform at a very high level. I believe last interview I was talking with them, I think we all knew it was coming down the pipeline, but we haven't seen an official announcement just yet. So we did get to see finally officially added Boo on the roster of High Coast. But yeah, that's my main reason I moved them up a spot, number 1. Next up, we're looking at Triumph, which is the roster of Sheikh Zula, B-Wills, Viz, Cooper, and 6A, with the coach of Tactus. Super excited to see what this roster can be. That's why I left them in second place after a couple of grand finals. I think they'll be doing quite well with a little bit more practice. I think they need a little more work on building up a structure, as do all teams whenever they kind of develop a brand new core. They've got all the pieces of a good team with the IGL like Shigzul. They should be doing just fine here. Just give them a couple weeks, and I think they might be able to overtake High Coast. That'll be a really fun rivalry in Group A, which is one of the things I'm most excited to see. Is watching those two teams kind of duke it out for that #1 spot throughout the season. With that being said, that's pretty much all I've got on this team. I got high expectations for them in the season, and once they get a little work under their belt, more practice, more time, I think they'll be doing just fine. So next up, we have the team of Secret Club. They are Vic, Classia, Jitter, Wolfie, Slight, and they had recently added a coach of Gator. This is going to be a great adjustment for them. I'm super excited to see Gator on the roster, as well as Slight, who has been really doing well in this team. I think he's been having a lot of success. I really didn't expect all that much from Slight. I think he's going to fill in as a really good role player, and he's been doing pretty well stats-wise in the team. I was very surprised to see that. I remember Slight a little bit from Advanced, and I casted quite a bit of his games, and to see him kind of succeed in the Premier level, at least in the Cash Cups and Mythic Cups, is pretty cool to see. But with that being said, I also want to mention Secret Club is looking for an organization, so if you're an org looking for a team, this is a great place to start. They are in my 3rd spot for the power rankings, so make sure you all get on that. They are currently orgless, I believe, at the moment, so if you're an org, make sure that you get on that. They've got a really strong core. They added a new coach, which is going to be super useful for them, and I expect high things from them. But yeah, I put them up a spot because of their best of 3 against High Coast, where they were able to take them down in a 2-0 fashion, move on to the grand finals of the Cash Cup, where they were able to get 2nd place. They fell a little bit short versus Bad News Bears. PTR had himself a hell of a game in that match, so be on the lookout for this team. I think that Recon 5 is going to be fighting for their spot back, though, for sure. The next roster I'll be speaking on comes in at number 4. It's going to be Cobra, Cynic, Jazz Pimp, CJ the King, and Raizu. This organization is now called Recon 5, or rather team is now called Recon 5. They were previously called Rugrats, for anyone that's a little bit confused as to why Rugrats isn't on this roster or power rankings anymore. It's because they have been picked up by an organization called Recon 5, who has been in the scene for a little bit now. Super excited to see them kind of get themselves back into the scene as well. Shows signs of life for the NACS scene. I switched out Secret Club in Recon 5 for the sole reason that Secret Club was looking really good recently. Not much because Recon 5 was looking bad. I think that they need a little bit of time to gel. I'm not sure if they were playing with their full roster in the Cash Cups, so that might be playing a little bit of a factor in this team. So still have high expectations for this organization. I think that they'll be close on Secret Club's tail. I think it's going to be another interesting rivalry between these two teams of Secret Club and Recon 5. Even RBG is going to be close behind them as well, because they have been showing a lot of life in the Cash Cups. They were very, or rather Mythic Cups, but they were impressing me quite a bit. But I'll get to that here in a second. But with that being said, that's pretty much all I've got on Recon 5. It wasn't much the things that they did that moved them down a spot. Mostly it was Secret Club kind of impressing me. Next up, we've got RBG, who has just recently played in the Mythic Cash Cup as well as the ESEA Cash Cup. They played in both. They had a really good showing in the Mythic Cup. They were able to take down Rebirth in what was a phenomenal series to watch. A great comeback from RBG, which is kind of one of their main stories. One of their key storylines is that they have a lot of comeback potential in this team. I've seen it so many times from them, and they showed it once again in the Mythic Cup, where they were able to just barely make a comeback in their best of 3 versus Rebirth, where they were already, I believe, standing down a match. If we go and look at the HLTV page, yeah, they won the first one. They were down a 12-3 half here, and they were able to finally tie it and move on further down the bracket. So super excited to see that from RBG. Their roster still Hex, Walkawist, Chop, and Wolfie. I know they're focused on longevity, which makes me think they won't have any trouble in kind of moving up the bracket, or rather power rankings for me. I expect good things from them, and I think they'll be close behind Secret Club, Recon 5, and even trying to fight for that top spot, possibly. They had a really good showcase versus Triumph. They weren't able to close it out, but in the end, they still impressed me in the best of threes that I saw from them, and I expect things further down the line. Interesting note is that they did not do too well versus Bad News Bears, to beat them 16-4 on the ESEA Cash Cup, which was interesting to see. I'm excited to see more of that, but I'll talk about Bad News Bears here further down the line. That's pretty much all I got from RBG. They still remain in that kind of middle spot, the 5th place ranking, and I will move on to Rebirth. So moving on to the currently updated roster of Rebirth. Now this could be a little bit different because a couple players are not paid, but either way, looking at their performance in the Mythic Cup versus RBG, I think because of how Third Impact is currently performing, I think that it's fair to say that they do deserve that kind of move up into the 6th spot. I think that while this roster has kind of struggled against like a team like RBG, against that closeout where they were up like 12-3 and unable to close that game out, they still show a lot of potential in the long term, and I do kind of have high expectations for them for right now. So being able to take RBG so close, nearly were able to overcome them. I think they'll be close behind RBG, another interesting rivalry in Group A, but we'll see how things pan out here. But with that, that's pretty much all I have for Rebirth. Next up, we have Third Impact. To just give another little disclaimer, I am a content creator for Third Impact. I do really appreciate the support they have given me. But with that being said, with all that aside, I will mention that Third Impact, so far, it's been a little bit disappointing in their recent Cash Cups endeavors. I believe they lost pretty badly to GGPR, who had a great game versus them. And with that being said, I kind of put them a spot down with the fact that Rebirth was showing a lot of signs of life. But other than that, Third Impact, I think they have a little bit more to work on. I think they have a lot of support there. Definitely focused on trying to continue to work with this roster. But so far, I've just been a little bit disappointed by the results. And before they kind of regain their spot, regain their kind of momentum, I do want to see a little more success come from this roster. Some more results on the board before I can kind of expect any sort of move up to try and take on a team like RBG, Recon 5, or Secret Club. But until that happens, they're going to be hovering around the 6th or 7th spot for sure. Coming in at number 8, we have Big Chillin. They made 2 adjustments in the likes of adding Minus and Icy. Obviously, Minus replacing Viz, and Icy kind of filling in that 5th spot that was previously filled in by Monk as well. I mean, I'm not sure if those are the player-for-player replacements, but the 2 spots left open on Big Chillin. I still expect this roster to do big things. I think they'll be kind of hovering around the 6th through 8th spot. I think they have an opportunity to take on Third Impact and Rebirth. I do think they're gonna struggle against the top 5 teams in this group, who have obviously proved themselves to be really strong. But with that being said, I don't have much to note on this roster altogether. From my interview with Micro, it seemed like they were having some troubles, as if you watch that interview, and maybe Monk could have possibly, or at least getting rid or substituting Monk for another player could have been the answer for them. But other than that, I think that they still kind of hold that 8th place spot. Moving on just a little bit further here, we've got Levitate, who have been recently picked up by an organization. If y'all remember from last week. They were previously called Hate's Chess Club. Now they've got picked up by an org called Levitate. Excited to see that as always. Always good to see orgs backing these rosters up. I believe only one team in this group is not backed up by an org. But with that being said, talk a little bit about Levitate. They are rocking with Hate, Nox, Rin, Johan, Wilkie, and they recently added the coach of Vu, which I'm excited to see. All in all, I think this roster has a lot of potential to develop. Again, I've said it about kind of these bottom tier teams because I think all of it's true. Maybe with the exception of Rebirth. I really don't know what to expect from that until I see some results. But all of these teams have a very strong opportunity to try and develop some talent with these coaches that they've added. A lot of them have coaches. Super excited to see Vu working with this roster, and it seems like they've been having a little bit of success here and there with the cash cups. I believe I saw a tweet from Vu talking about them needing a coach after what Vu had been working with them. I'm not sure what Vu's role is going to be in terms of developing strategy, as I believe Hate the IGL of the roster. It's either Hate or Nox being the IGL. How closely they're going to be working with Vu to try and develop strategies. I know that Vu has a really good mind for tactics, so maybe we'll get to see a little bit of that from Levitate and see their opportunities rise. I could definitely see them kind of moving up a couple of spots for sure in the long term. And last but not least, we've got Imperium Esports with the roster of Valence, DZ, Sherps, J-Dubs, and Rise. Super excited to see this team. I still kind of want to hold out on making much assumptions about this roster just because I really haven't seen too much from them. I know they were playing in the DreamHack qualifier. I didn't see them get too far down the bracket in that, but other than that, I think this roster could be good. They've got Valence able to kind of develop this talent. Again, I kind of shouted out J-Dubs and Rise in my last video. Still kind of looking forward to seeing what they can accomplish in this roster, seeing what sort of moves they can make. I really love the Imperium org, as a lot of you all know. They were one of the orgs that first kind of got me started into casting. Not really started, but was supporting me in my casts. So shout out to them. But yeah, I do think that they need a little bit of time, show me a little bit of results here before they're able to move up any, and I'm sure that will be able to happen throughout the season. But that is pretty much all for Group A of the power rankings. Again, this group does seem to have more spread out, tougher teams. They've got the top 5, possibly top 6 teams that are looking really strong, and only that one team that's made the move up from advanced. But when I move into Group B, I'll talk a little bit more about it. It's definitely tough to say which group can be a little bit harder if you look at the sort of teams and caliber. But other than that, that's pretty much all I've got for Group A, as I will now throw it over to Group B. Starting off, we're going to talk a little bit about Extra Salt. This is going to be now transitioning over into Group B, obviously. But I want to talk a little bit about Extra Salt because they were able to have plenty of success in the DreamHack Open qualifier. They are one of the first teams that qualified with some very dominant performances over plenty of the teams over in that event. The one thing I'll note is that Bad News Bears, with some time, could try and catch up to this roster. Bad News Bears have been really dominating in at least the Cash Cup. We didn't quite get to see the roster formulate in the Mythic Cup just yet, but with the limited practice that they had with their 2 performances in both the DreamHack Open qualifier and the ESEA Winter Cash Cup, I have very high expectations for this sort of rivalry in Group B between these 2 teams. But all in all, Extra Salt, they should be able to hold their own and maintain that number 1 spot. Next up, we have Bad News Bears. This team moved up in place of Depth, taking their number 2 spot. They finished off their roster with Swisher, PTR, Janji, Alter, Spongy, and MCE. The reason I moved them up is quite obvious. They were able to win the ESEA Winter Cash Cup, which hopefully will encourage some further work with this team, some further motivation in terms of practicing and things like that, because really they've been dominating. And again, like I mentioned in the previous when I was talking about Extra Salt, is that they have an opportunity to really challenge Extra Salt in their number 1 position. So all in all, super pumped to see what's to come of this roster. They did a great job of rounding it out, and so far they've been impressing me. So high expectations for this, and we'll see how they're able to perform in the future. Coming in 3rd place is going to be Depth. This roster, formerly known as Timbermen, they just got picked up. I'm not sure if that's the logo they're using, but that is the newest logo that I've had on standby, ready for me to use. So that roster's still rocking with Shane, Dare, Snav, Rek, and Kel with their coach of Flutch. And most of the reason why I moved them down a spot is because of the success of Bad News Bears again. Nothing that really Depth did wrong other than kind of having a couple tough performances in the Cash Cup. But all in all, I do expect this roster to stabilize. I'm sure they'll be able to perform well in Premier. I think they'll be able to hold on to that top 3 spot even. I think it'll be a struggle for them to kind of overtake Bad News Bears or Extra Salt from what I've been seeing from them so far. I think it's not going to be easy whatsoever for sure to take that number 1 or number 2 spot away from them. But we'll see if Depth can be those good challengers to those 2 spots in Group B. It'll be interesting to see how they're able to fare up against those 2 teams specifically. But other than that, I do think they'll be able to hold this top 3 throughout the season. Kind of hover around top 3, maybe even top 2 if they're able to break through. But other than that, they should remain relatively stable in their spot. Number 5 is going to be Oceanus. This team, previously known as Russian Canadians, who recently got picked up by this organization. So as always, I'll just say super excited to see. Joel's, Vec, KMC, Castro, Emilio. It's kind of a reverse case of Depth. They didn't do much to really earn this spot other than Mythic kind of dropping out of the top 4. They're still remaining in the top 5, but they did a great job of qualifying for the Mythic Cup, I will say. It was very impressive, the run that they were able to have, but unfortunately they weren't quite able to compete in that first round and got knocked out in the quarterfinals. So I believe they were playing Secret Club as well, and so obviously losing to a pretty strong team in a pretty dominant fashion means that they kind of are hovering around that 4th spot. I think that they will be a little bit better than Mythic Reborn. I think it'll be a challenge for them to overtake Depth, in my opinion, over the long run of the season. I'm excited to see, though, what this roster is able to pull through. Now, coming in at number 5, we're going to talk a little bit about Mythic Reborn with Flom, Davey, Adrin, Jojo, and Daff. I'm not too sure about Daff, but I do know quite a bit about Jojo. He is an opper. He's really been playing exclusively on that role, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there with Flom and Jojo. Might be picking up the secondary op role for Jojo. Might be utilizing it more than some other teams here. If that we'll see if that's the case here later on. But I did put them down a spot under Oceanus just because they lost their best player. Katie was not by far the best player, but definitely one of the most impressive players in the current Mythic Reborn roster. So losing Katie does put them down a spot alongside losing kind of that main core that they've been maintaining for plenty of seasons. So just those 2 factors alone kind of make it seem as if they're not going to quite be the same level as what I initially thought they would be. And while it won't play too much of a factor, I think that trying to introduce Jojo and Daff into the roster will definitely prove to be some sort of challenge. We'll see if long-term it does work out well, though I imagine that these 2 players would be in it for the long haul if that is the case. But other than that, we'll move on to Eclipse. Now, moving on to number 6 of Eclipse, we have Droid, Nero, Zeptic, John, and Robbie. I think they've kind of been able to hold their spot because of the work that they've been doing to kind of get themselves into the season. They've been doing a lot of cash cups, so I do kind of put them above Org Need, who I haven't really seen anything of, but do kind of have that experience of being in Premier. But that being said, I'm going to leave them at number 6 here. We'll see if they're able to hold on. They've had a tough loss against Big Chillin Shop, which is an advanced team. It's Big Chillin's advanced team. So losing to them, while they're not really like a easy team to beat, they're pretty strong all in all. It is kind of interesting to see a team like Eclipse drop it in double overtime too. So there was like a fight, but not quite able to take down that advanced team, which, in a best of one could be a small note to kind of take into effect. But all in all, I don't think it's enough to quite put them forward into a spot below someone like Org Need, GGPR, or SKDC. Next up, we have Org Need, who have finished rounding out their roster. Jet did end up playing with Daryl, so I believe that keeps their spot. And they've added Delta 9, Nuang, and Vulcan. So, not sure what to expect from this roster. Again, big shout out to Dust 2. That's really the only background that I've been able to get off of these players. I do remember Delta 9, I believe, played on Ad Ice at one point or Ad Ice, one of the mouse orgs back a while back. But other than that, I really don't have much background on this roster. So not sure what to expect. I think that with some of the players' experience, they should be able to hold their own. But I think that putting them in a number 7 spot might be a little bit generous just off of experience. But all in all, I think that this is kind of where they will be hovering around. Again, no idea what to expect from this roster. But experience alone, I put them just behind Eclipse, who were able to, get some practice in. But other than that, just still waiting on some results here. But I think that's kind of a nice place to put them with the experience that comes into this season. Now, coming in at number 8, we have GGPR, still kind of keeping them in the same spot. I did actually end up putting SKDC behind them and Org Need as well. This kind of for the sole reason that they made some adjustments. I still think that Vic is a huge loss, obviously, to this roster. I think that anyone who disagrees with that is off their rocker. But other than that, we still have the same roster of Lowrider, Rearc Ooze, Yuz, Creed, and George Snorts. Watched a little bit of them in the Cash Cup. They were able to take down Third Impact, which is part of the reason why I put them above SKDC. But other than that, I think they're going to struggle against some of these teams. I will say, though, that they didn't impress me a little bit in their match versus Third Impact. I think that they have a possibility of pulling through, maybe even ahead of Mythic if they have a really good season and entering into that top 5. But I really think that they can struggle throughout the season if they don't get the ball moving pretty early on. And we'll see how they do throughout the season here. But keeping them at number 8, while they do kind of edge ahead of SKDC. Number 9 is going to be SKDC, where they have Huyan, Ocean, Desi, Hiki, and Sensu. They had just recently lost Symphis, as I'm not sure what Symphis was doing. All I know is that he's no longer playing. Maybe couldn't quite commit the time into what the roster needed to kind of perform in Premier. With that being said, Huyan, I think will be a fine replacement for Symphis. Symphis did very well, though, I will say. He was kind of a huge clutch factor for SKDC, so I think losing him will kind of be a tough spot. Also, Org Need kind of rounding out their roster, and GGPR having some success kind of put them a little bit back, set them back a couple spots here from week number 1. But with that being said, SKDC, I think they'll be doing just fine. Again, they have the possibility of taking on really any of the 5 through 10 teams maybe even Oceanus if they have a good game. But other than that, I think they'll be hovering around that 9th through 6th spot for sure. Finally, we'll finish things off talking about Rise Esports Club. They take the 10th spot here as Org-Need was able to round out their roster. They haven't really made any adjustments, but so far I haven't really seen any reason to kind of put them above any other team. And until really I see that, they will kind of remain at the bottom. They were the last minute invites, I believe, because of the 2 new additional spots in Premier, they were kind of able to secure one of those alongside Gaming exiting the league as well. So still definitely the possibility, like all of these top 5 team, or rather bottom 5 teams in this group, I could imagine hovering pretty closely together. All of these would be hard to consider an upset. Maybe Rise versus Mythic, Rise versus Eclipse could be considered an upset, but very even when it comes to the bottom 5 teams here. I think once you get into the top 4, it gets a little bit tougher. Maybe even the top 5, Mythic could really prove to be stronger than I imagine them. But as they are 10th place, I don't want to count them out completely. But that is all that I have for the rankings. Thank you all so much for watching the video. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will be seeing you all here, not tonight, not Tuesday night with the cast, but I will be on the cast tomorrow, Wednesday, for the first couple games, for the first week of games for Premier. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching the video, and I will see you all tomorrow.